The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Metropolitan Hotel glittered above a sea of tuxedos and sequined gowns. Laughter and champagne clinks filled the air. To everyone else, it was just another charity gala. To Alina Moore, it was a battlefield. 6 months pregnant, her trembling hand rested on her stomach as she prayed her ex-husband wouldn't notice the life she carried inside her. Adrian Moore, sharp in a tailored suit, strode across the ballroom with his mistress clinging to his arm. His smug smile spread wide as he greeted the city's elites, pretending he had left behind nothing but ashes. For Elena, he wasn't just a memory. He was a threat. If Adrian discovered she was pregnant, he would drag her through court, steal her child, and claim fatherhood only to protect his empire. Her pulse raced when his eyes suddenly locked on her. The crowd thinned like water retreating from the shore. Adrian's steps grew closer, his mistress smirking at Elena as if victory was already hers. Elena's heart pounded. She couldn't let him see. She couldn't let him know. In that desperate moment, instinct took over. She turned sharply and collided into the chest of a tall stranger. Without thinking, she wrapped her arms around him, pressing her swollen belly out of Adrian's view. Gasps rippled through the guests. The stranger looked down, surprised but calm. His hand steadied her shoulder, and his deep voice broke the silence. "Darling, there you are." I was starting to worry. Adrian froze mid-step. His mistress's smirk vanished. Whispers erupted around the ballroom, echoing louder than the orchestra's strings. Elena didn't even know his name. She only knew that for one terrifying, impossible moment, this stranger had just become her shield. What she didn't know, what no one in that glittering room knew, was that the man she had clung to wasn't just a guest. He was Gabriel Knight, one of the most powerful billionaires in the world. And in that single embrace, her life and his had just changed forever. Bold whispers spread through the room. Who was the mysterious man holding Elena, and why did Adrian suddenly look afraid? Elena Moore had once believed in fairy tales. She was the kind of woman who wore her heart on her sleeve, who gave everything she had for love and expected nothing in return. At 27, she had the gentle aura of someone raised on simple dreams. Freshly painted classrooms, children's laughter, and the smell of oil paints on canvas. She taught art at a community school in Brooklyn, pouring her soul into the sketches and colors her students created. To them, she was more than a teacher. She was a guiding light. But behind the smile she wore every morning, Elena carried scars no one could see. Her marriage to Adrian Moore had once seemed like destiny. He was older, polished, a man of ambition with a charisma that could light up any room. When they first met, she thought she had been chosen by fortune itself. He showered her with roses, whispered promises of forever, and vowed to give her the kind of life she'd never dared to imagine. She said yes to his proposal in a heartbeat, blinded by the sparkle in his eyes. But fairy tales fade fast when built on lies. The first year was sweet, but by the second, Adrian's mask began to slip. He criticized her modest income, reminded her that without him she'd have nothing. His words became sharp knives, slicing away her confidence. When she became pregnant, Elena thought he might soften. Instead, he grew colder. He accused her of trapping him, of ruining his climb to the top of the corporate world. His mistress appeared soon after. Younger, flashier, the kind of woman Adrian believed belonged on his arm in front of New York's elite. The night he left, Elena stood in the kitchen, clutching the positive pregnancy test, while Adrian packed his designer suits into a leather bag. His last words before slamming the door had burned into her memory. "Don't expect me to play daddy. You'll never survive without me." That was the night Elena promised herself she would. Now, 6 months later, she lived quietly in a small apartment, hiding her growing belly beneath loose sweaters and scarves. She avoided crowded places where someone might see and whisper. More than anything, she feared Adrian discovering the truth. He didn't want her, but she knew in her bones, that he would want the child. To Adrian, a baby wasn't a life. It was a trophy, a tool, a future heir to his empire. If he found out, he would drag her through the courts, crush her with lawyers she couldn't afford, and rip her baby away before it ever saw the light of day. Elena's only comfort came at night, when she'd sit by her window with one hand on her belly, whispering lullabies. "It's just us, little one. Just us. I'll protect you, no matter what." The baby's soft kicks reminded her she wasn't entirely alone, but the world was merciless. Her colleagues whispered about her divorce. Neighbors gossiped about why Adrian had left. She bore it silently, swallowing her tears in the shower where no one could hear. To them, she was the poor abandoned wife. To herself, she was a mother fighting to keep her child safe. And now, fate had dragged her to that glittering gala, where Adrian's shadow loomed once more. One wrong move, one careless glance at her stomach, and everything she'd fought to protect could be lost. But as her arms tightened around the stranger who shielded her, Elena had no idea she had stepped into a storm greater than anything she had ever imagined. Once upon a time, Elena had thought Adrian Moore was her savior. He swept into her life like a whirlwind, all charm and sophistication, the kind of man who knew how to command attention simply by walking into a room. To a young art teacher who lived paycheck to paycheck, he was dazzling. He promised security, passion, and a future where she would never have to struggle again. For a while, she believed him. Their wedding was small but elegant, the kind of ceremony Elena thought was born from love. She wore her mother's lace veil, and Adrian kissed her with the confidence of a man who thought he owned the world. For the first few months, their marriage was sweet. He'd bring her flowers, take her to dinners in Midtown, whisper how lucky he was to have her. But slowly, the cracks appeared. Adrian's ambitions were endless. He wanted to be more than just successful. He wanted to be untouchable, a king in Manhattan's cutthroat world of real estate. And in his eyes, Elena became an anchor weighing him down. He mocked her modest salary, sneered at her paint-stained hands, and dismissed her dreams of opening an art studio as childish fantasies. The breaking point came when Elena found out she was pregnant. For her, it was a miracle. For him, it was a burden. "You've ruined everything," he hissed one night, throwing back a glass of whiskey. "Do you have any idea how hard it is to build an empire? And now I'm supposed to play house with a crying baby?" Elena begged him to see the child as a blessing. But Adrian's heart had already drifted. His late nights became longer, his excuses thinner. Then one evening, the truth walked into their home wearing red lipstick and a designer dress. Cassandra, his mistress. Adrian didn't even bother to hide her. He introduced her as if Elena had suddenly become invisible. The humiliation was unbearable. Adrian flaunted Cassandra at corporate events, whispering that Elena was too plain, too weak for his new world. When Elena confronted him, he didn't apologize. He laughed. "You should be grateful. I'm giving you freedom. You can keep your little teaching job. I'll keep my future." The final blow came on a rainy night when Adrian packed his bags without warning. Elena, clutching her pregnancy test, begged him to stay. He turned on her with cold eyes. "Don't expect me to be a father. You'll never survive without me. Mark my words, you'll come crawling back." And just like that, he was gone, leaving Elena alone with nothing but a crumbling heart and a child growing inside her. Months passed, but Adrian's shadow never disappeared. He paraded Cassandra in magazines, smiling as if he had upgraded his life. Reporters whispered that Elena had been too fragile, too simple for a man of his stature. Meanwhile, she faced the world's judgment in silence. Bills piled up, morning sickness drained her strength, and the gossip of neighbors cut deeper than any knife. Still, she endured. She held on to her baby as the only light left in her life, but the fear remained. If Adrian ever discovered the truth, he would not hesitate to use the courts, his money, and his influence to rip her child away. And now, as she stood in that ballroom with his eyes burning into her, Elena knew the man who once vowed to love her was the same man who could destroy her with a single move. The nights were always the hardest. Elena would sit alone in her tiny Brooklyn apartment, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence as she held her growing belly. The city outside buzzed with life, taxis rushing, laughter spilling from bars, but inside her world was frozen. 6 months pregnant and abandoned, she had no one to lean on except the child she hadn't even met yet. Every morning, she forced herself to smile for her students. She painted rainbows with them, clapped for their messy finger art, and answered their innocent questions with warmth. But when the classroom door shut, the mask cracked. Behind the cheerful teacher was a woman silently breaking. She hid the nausea, the back pain, the fear that clawed at her chest every night. The whispers didn't help. Parents at the school eyed her with pity. Neighbors glanced at her stomach with curiosity. They all knew Adrian had left. The tabloids had made sure of that. Adrian Moore, rising real estate mogul, spotted with new flame, the headlines blared, showing glossy photos of him and Cassandra sipping champagne. Meanwhile, Elena was reduced to nothing more than the abandoned wife. She swallowed her tears, but they always came back stronger. At night, in the shower, she let them flow, mixing with the water so no one, not even herself, could tell where the pain ended and the healing began. Money was another dagger. Adrian had frozen their joint accounts before he walked out. Elena's teacher's salary barely covered rent and groceries. Doctor visits drained what little she had left. She cut corners, skipped meals, convinced herself a slice of bread and water would be enough if it meant saving for prenatal vitamins. She whispered apologies to her unborn child as her stomach growled in the darkness. But the deepest wound wasn't money or gossip. It was loneliness. The cruel kind of loneliness that gnawed at her bones and made every kick of her baby both a comfort and a reminder. She longed for someone to rub her back during sleepless nights, someone to hold her hand at doctor's appointments, someone to whisper that everything would be okay. Instead, she walked into clinics alone, clutching her medical papers, pretending she wasn't terrified. Her doctor noticed. "You need support, Elena," she said gently after one visit. "Stress isn't good for the baby." Elena nodded, but inside she screamed. Where was she supposed to find support? Her parents were gone, her friends had faded once Adrian's lies spread, and her sister Maria lived states away, fighting her own battles as a lawyer. Elena had no one, and yet she clung to hope. In quiet moments she pressed her hand against her belly and whispered, "I'll protect you. I'll never let him hurt you." It was a promise she intended to keep, even if it killed her. Still, fate was cruel. On her way home one evening, Elena passed by a glowing billboard downtown. Adrian's face beamed from it, Cassandra at his side, the caption beneath reading, "The Power Couple Redefining New York Real Estate." Her knees buckled. Strangers walked past without a glance as Elena collapsed onto a bench, fighting back sobs that clawed at her throat. And in that moment of despair, she had no idea her life was about to collide with someone powerful enough to rewrite her fate forever. The ballroom sparkled like a dream, but for Elena Moore it was a nightmare wrapped in gold and crystal. She had been forced to attend the charity gala by her school's principal, an event meant to showcase donors who supported the arts program. To everyone else, it was a glamorous evening. For Elena, it was walking into enemy territory. Adrian was there. Of course he was. Tall, arrogant, his arm locked around Cassandra's waist like a prized possession. He moved from group to group, laughing too loudly, shaking hands as if he owned the entire hotel. The sight of him drained the blood from Elena's face. She had prayed she wouldn't run into him. But fate was cruel. Adrian spotted her almost instantly. His eyes narrowed, lips curling into a smile that wasn't warm. It was sharp, calculated. Cassandra followed his gaze, her painted lips twisting into a smirk of satisfaction. The humiliation was thick in the air, like perfume choking her. Elena's instinct screamed, "Hide. Protect the baby. Don't let him know." Her hand flew to her stomach, but it was too late. Adrian's steps carried him closer, the crowd parting in subtle recognition of his power. Elena's legs froze. Fear clawed up her throat. She couldn't run. She couldn't let him see the truth. And then, like lightning, she turned and collided with a man's chest. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his suit cut with quiet authority. Elena didn't think. She acted. Wrapping her arms around him, she pressed herself into the stranger, shielding her belly from Adrian's approaching gaze. Gasps rippled across the room. The string quartet faltered for a beat. The man glanced down, startled but calm, his sharp gray eyes locking onto hers. His hand steadied her shoulder, firm yet protective. Then, with a smoothness that suggested he was used to commanding attention, he spoke loudly enough for the room to hear. "Darling, there you are," he said, his voice low and steady. "I was starting to worry." Whispers erupted instantly. Adrian froze mid-step, his smirk cracking. Cassandra's grip tightened on his arm as murmurs circled. "Darling? Who is he?" Elena's heart raced. She didn't know this man. She didn't even know his name. But in that moment, he had become her lifeline. She clung tighter, playing the role as though her survival depended on it, because in truth, it did. Adrian's eyes burned with suspicion, darting between Elena and the stranger. He forced a laugh, masking his shock. Well, well, he drawled. Elena, you didn't tell me you'd moved on so quickly. His words dripped with venom disguised his charm. The stranger didn't flinch. Instead, he placed a hand gently but possessively at the small of Elena's back, guiding her a step away from Adrian. She doesn't owe you explanations, he said coolly, his tone carrying quiet steel. The tension snapped like electricity. Adrian's jaw tightened, Cassandra's smile faltered, and the entire ballroom seemed to lean closer, hungry for scandal. Elena's breath shook. She had no idea who this man was, why he was helping her, or what he expected in return. But for the first time in months, standing beneath the chandeliers and the suffocating gaze of her ex-husband, she didn't feel defenseless. What she didn't yet know was that the man shielding her wasn't just a stranger. He was Gabriel Knight, a billionaire with power equal to Adrian's and secrets of his own. Adrian Moore was a man who thrived on control. Deals, people, even emotions. He believed everything had a price. Everything could be bent to his will. But what he witnessed at the gala had unsettled him. Elena, the wife he'd cast aside like worn shoes, was suddenly in the arms of a stranger. And not just any stranger, a man who radiated the kind of power Adrian recognized instantly. Back in his penthouse later that night, Adrian poured himself a drink and replayed the moment in his mind. The way the stranger had spoken, calm, commanding, as if he had every right to hold Elena. The way the crowd whispered his name with reverence. Gabriel Knight. Adrian had heard it before, in hushed tones around boardrooms. A billionaire investor, elusive, dangerous in his silence. Adrian slammed the glass down. Impossible, he muttered. Elena couldn't have moved on to someone like him. She was weak, fragile. She didn't belong in Gabriel Knight's world. Unless she had been hiding something. The thought gnawed at him. He remembered her loose sweaters, the way she avoided his gaze at the gala. A flicker of suspicion slithered through his mind. Could she be hiding more than just a new man? By morning, Adrian's paranoia had hardened into obsession. He called one of his trusted associates, a private investigator named Lowell. I want everything on Gabriel Knight. His businesses, his habits, and why the hell my ex-wife is suddenly clinging to him like a lifeline. Lowell hesitated. Knight isn't easy, sir. He keeps things sealed. No leaks, no scandals. The press barely touches him. Then dig deeper, Adrian snapped. Everyone has cracks. Find his. But the investigation wasn't only about Gabriel. Adrian wanted Elena's secrets too. He needed to know what she was hiding. Why she looked so pale, so protective of herself. He remembered Cassandra's mocking words after the gala. Your ex looks thicker than before. Did she let herself go? Adrian hadn't laughed. His gut told him the answer wasn't indulgence, it was pregnancy. The thought made his blood run cold. If Elena was carrying his child, it meant a direct heir to his empire existed beyond his grasp, and that he could not allow. Meanwhile, Elena sensed the shift. She noticed the black sedan parked too long across from her building. She caught strangers lingering outside her school. She knew Adrian's paranoia well. She had lived under its weight for years. Now it was back, stronger than ever. Her hands trembled when she locked her door at night. She whispered to her unborn child, "He won't take you. I won't let him." But deep down, fear gnawed at her resolve. Adrian had money, lawyers, and a ruthlessness that once left her broken. Gabriel noticed too. Though Elena barely knew him, his instincts sharpened the moment he saw her flinch at shadows. One evening, as he walked her to her car after the gala, he leaned close and said quietly, "Who exactly are you hiding from?" Elena froze, unable to answer. Her silence spoke louder than words. And in that silence, Gabriel Knight made a decision. If Adrian Moore was hunting Elena, then Gabriel would become the wall Adrian could never break. The morning after the gala, Elena woke with a pounding heart. Sleep had been shallow, haunted by Adrian's smirk and the whispers of the crowd. But what unsettled her most wasn't Adrian. It was the stranger she had clung to, the man who had played along as though he'd known her all his life. She pulled back the curtains of her small apartment and sighed. The city roared on, indifferent to her struggles. For a fleeting moment, she convinced herself she'd never see him again. Maybe that was for the best. Then her phone buzzed. The message was simple, direct. "You don't know me, but last night wasn't nothing. If Adrian is a threat, I can help. GK." Her hands shook. She didn't remember giving him her number, but somehow he had it. She stared at the screen for a long time, torn between fear and something else, hope. She typed back quickly, "I don't need your help. Please don't contact me again." The reply came within minutes. "Fair enough, but know this. Adrian has already started digging. He's looking into me, which means he's looking into you. Be careful." Elena's stomach nodded. How could he know that? And why should she trust him? She closed the phone, forcing herself to breathe. She had survived this long without a man's protection. She couldn't afford to lean on another one, not now. But Gabriel Knight was not a man who walked away easily. Later that afternoon, Elena noticed him again, sitting in a sleek black car across from her school, speaking into his phone, eyes scanning the street. When their gazes met, he lifted a hand in a casual wave, as if to say, "I'm here. You're not alone." Her cheeks burned with anger. After dismissing her message, why was he still following her? She stormed over after classes, her belly pressing against her loose coat, and rapped on his window. He lowered it smoothly, his gray eyes calm. "You're stalking me now?" she hissed. "No," Gabriel said softly. "I'm watching him." "Adrian?" Gabriel nodded once. "Your ex-husband isn't subtle. He's had someone tailing you since last night. I figured you'd prefer if someone else was watching the watcher." Elena froze. The irritation drained from her face, replaced with unease. She glanced around quickly, scanning the street but saw nothing. Still, a part of her knew Gabriel wasn't lying. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "Why would you care?" Gabriel's expression didn't change, but his voice softened. "Because I know men like him, and because last night you looked at me like I was the only shield you had left. I don't ignore that." Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to tell him she didn't need saving. But the truth was harsher, she did. Still, trusting him felt impossible. She had trusted once before, and it had destroyed her. She stepped back, shaking her head. "I can handle myself." "Maybe," Gabriel said, starting the engine. "But remember, Elena, even the strongest walls crack when they stand alone." He drove away, leaving her trembling on the sidewalk. She told herself she didn't need him. But deep down, Elena knew Gabriel Knight had just stepped into her story, and whether she liked it or not, he wasn't leaving. The classroom smelled faintly of paint and glue, the scent of childhood innocence. Elena had just finished helping her students clean up when the door creaked open. She expected the janitor, maybe her principal. Instead, she froze at the sight of Adrian and Cassandra stepping inside, dressed as if they owned the world. Her heart dropped. Adrian wore a tailored suit that screamed power. Cassandra clung to his arm in a crimson dress, her lips curled into a smile that dripped with mockery. Their presence in her sanctuary, the one place Elena felt safe, was a violation she hadn't prepared for. "What are you doing here?" Elena's voice was low, sharp, but her hands trembled behind her desk. Adrian let out a laugh, smooth and poisonous. "Relax, Elena. We're here on business. Cassandra and I are considering a sizable donation to this school. Thought we'd come see the facilities." Cassandra's eyes swept the room, lingering on the childish drawings pinned to the walls. She gave a soft chuckle. "Cute. You really haven't moved on, have you? Still surrounded by crayons and glue sticks while Adrian builds empires." The word sliced through Elena's chest, but she stood tall. "Leave. This is not the place." But Adrian wasn't done. He circled the classroom slowly, eyes narrowing. "Funny thing, Elena," he said, voice dropping. "You look different. Rounder, tired, almost like someone carrying a little secret." Her blood turned to ice. She pulled her cardigan tighter, praying he wouldn't see the swell beneath. "Stop," she whispered. But Cassandra stepped forward, her smile vicious. "Oh, Adrian, don't be cruel. If Elena's condition is what I think it is, shouldn't we congratulate her?" She turned her sharp gaze on Elena. "Or are you hiding something from your ex-husband?" Elena's throat closed. The classroom walls felt like they were collapsing. She could feel her students peeking in from the hallway, sensing something wrong. Whispers spread like wildfire. Pregnant? Abandoned? The humiliation burned her skin. Adrian had orchestrated this, coming here, cornering her in her own workplace, planting seeds of scandal that would follow her everywhere. She clenched her fists, fighting back tears. "Leave," she said again, her voice breaking. Adrian leaned close, his smile wolfish. "If you are carrying my child, Elena, remember this. No matter what you think, that child belongs to me. The words slammed into her like a blow. Her vision blurred, her breath ragged. She wanted to scream, to fight back, but fear pinned her. Cassandra laughed softly, tugging Adrian toward the door. "Don't worry, darling," Cassandra cooed. "We'll let the world know soon enough. Everyone loves a juicy scandal." As they left, Alina collapsed into her chair, shaking uncontrollably. Her students' innocent eyes widened in the hallway before the principal rushed to shoo them away. Alone, Alina buried her face in her hands. The tears came hot, unstoppable. Adrian had humiliated her publicly, planting doubt in the very place where she drew strength. And though she didn't know it yet, this attack was only the beginning of Adrian's plan to strip her of everything, including the right to call herself a mother. The sky broke open that evening, pouring sheets of cold rain across the city. Elena walked aimlessly down the slick sidewalks, her coat clinging to her, her shoes soaked through. She didn't care. The humiliation at school replayed in her head like a cruel film. Adrian's words, Cassandra's laughter, the whispers of her students, it all echoed, louder than the thunder above. She wrapped her arms around her belly, whispering apologies to the child she carried. "I'm so sorry. I can't even protect you from him." Her voice cracked as tears blended with the rain. Strangers brushed past, umbrellas raised, but no one stopped. To the world, she was just another broken woman in a city that swallowed broken people whole. Her knees buckled as she reached a deserted corner near the subway entrance. She sank onto the cold steps, water pooling around her. The weight of everything pressed down, the loneliness, the fear of losing her child, the suffocating shadow of Adrian. She let out a sob so raw it startled even herself. For months she had bottled it all in, playing strong. Tonight, the dam broke. "Why me?" she whispered into the storm. "Why can't I just be left alone?" A hand appeared, steady and strong, offering her shelter beneath a large black umbrella. Startled, she looked up and met the familiar gray eyes of Gabriel Knight. He crouched beside her, rain dripping from his sharp jawline, his suit damp despite the umbrella. "Elena," he said softly, his voice almost drowned by the storm. "Come on. You'll make yourself sick." She shook her head violently. "Why are you here? Why can't you just leave me alone?" "Because you're not fine," Gabriel replied calmly, "and because I don't walk away when someone is being hunted." His words cut through her defenses. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but another sob escaped her chest. Gabriel didn't flinch. Instead, he slipped his jacket from his shoulders and draped it around her, shielding her shivering frame. For the first time, Elena didn't resist. She leaned into the warmth, trembling, her tears soaking the expensive fabric. Gabriel said nothing, didn't press for answers. He simply stood there in the rain, a silent fortress against the chaos of her world. Minutes passed before she found her voice again. "He won't stop," she whispered. "Adrian, he'll take everything, even my baby." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "Not if I can help it." She pulled back, startled. "Why do you care?" He held her gaze, steady and unyielding. "Because I see a woman fighting alone when she shouldn't have to, and because men like Adrian only win if no one stands in their way." Her heart pounded. She wanted to believe him, wanted to let herself trust, but the wounds Adrian had left were too deep. She shook her head again, whispering, "I can't afford to trust you." Gabriel didn't argue. He only offered his hand. "Then don't trust me. Just let me help." The storm raged around them, but in that moment, Elena realized something she hadn't in months. She wasn't completely alone. And as Gabriel guided her out of the rain, neither of them knew this fragile moment would ignite a firestorm that could destroy Adrian's empire, or save Elena's future. Elena awoke the next morning, wrapped in an unfamiliar warmth. For a moment, she panicked, until she realized the jacket draped over her wasn't hers. Gabriel's. She had fallen asleep on her couch, still clutching it like a lifeline. Memories of the night before flooded back. The rain, the breakdown, his steady presence. She pressed her hands to her face, embarrassed. Why had she let herself lean on him, even for a moment? Her phone buzzed. A new headline lit up the screen. "Reclusive billionaire Gabriel Knight seen at charity gala." Her stomach lurched. She clicked the article. There he was, photographed with her in his arms, the caption cruel. Who was the mystery woman clinging to Manhattan's most elusive billionaire? Elena's blood turned cold. Billionaire? Gabriel wasn't just some stranger who had taken pity on her. He was one of the most powerful men in the country, and now her face was plastered across tabloids, linked to him. The very thing she had fought to avoid, attention, was crashing down on her. Her phone rang again, this time Maria's voice cutting through. "Elena, what have you gotten yourself into?" "I didn't, Maria, it wasn't what it looked like," Elena stammered, pacing the apartment. "I don't even know him. It just happened." Maria sighed heavily. "Do you understand what this means? Adrian will see this. He'll use it against you. He'll claim you're reckless, unstable, and if he finds out about the baby—" Her voice trailed off. Elena's hands trembled as she sank onto the couch. She hadn't told Maria the truth, not fully. But now, the walls were closing in. As if summoned, her phone buzzed with another message. "You should know who I am before the world tells you their version. Lunch. Today. GK." Her pulse raced. Against her better judgment, she went. The restaurant was quiet, discreet, the kind of place reserved for deals worth billions. Gabriel sat at a corner table, calm, his eyes fixed on her the moment she walked in. He rose, pulling out a chair for her. "Thank you for coming." Elena sat stiffly. "Why didn't you tell me who you were?" Gabriel's gaze didn't waver. "Would it have mattered? You would have run." "You're right," she admitted, her voice sharp. "I would have. Because men with power, they don't help for free." For a moment, his eyes softened. "Not all power corrupts, Elena." But her chest tightened with panic. "Now my face is everywhere. Adrian will see it. He'll know something's going on." Gabriel leaned forward, his voice calm but edged with steel. "Let him. Adrian Moore doesn't intimidate me." The words should have comforted her, but instead they terrified her. If Gabriel and Adrian clashed, she would be caught in the middle, her child's future hanging in the balance. "I don't want a war," she whispered. Gabriel's jaw tightened. "Sometimes war finds us, whether we want it or not." Her heart pounded as she stood abruptly, the chair scraping the floor. "I can't do this. I can't be another pawn in some man's game. I just want to protect my baby." The words slipped out before she realized. Baby. Gabriel's eyes flickered with shock, then understanding. He said nothing, but in that silence, Elena felt stripped bare. And as she fled the restaurant, one truth echoed in her mind. She had just revealed her most dangerous secret to the one man who could change everything. Adrian Moore had always treated life like a chessboard, and he considered himself a grandmaster. The moment he saw the tabloids linking Elena to Gabriel Knight, his blood boiled, but not with jealousy. With opportunity. Sitting in his penthouse office, Adrian tossed the glossy magazine across his desk. Cassandra flipped through it, her red nails tapping lazily against the page. "She looks pathetic," she purred, clinging to him like a lifeline. "Honestly, it's almost sad." Adrian's jaw clenched. "It's not sad, it's leverage." Cassandra arched a brow. "Leverage?" He leaned back in his chair, swirling a glass of scotch. "Elena's reckless. She parades around with another man, and now the whole city thinks she's entangled with Knight. You know what that makes her? An unfit mother. Judges hate scandal." Cassandra's smirk widened. "So you're saying—" "I'm saying," Adrian interrupted, "that if she's pregnant, and I'm betting she is, then she won't keep that child. Not without me. I'll go to court, claim she's unstable, living off scraps, and dragging my name through the mud. A man like me?" He smirked. "I'll win custody before the baby takes its first breath." Cassandra clapped her hands in delight. "And the mistress becomes the mother. How poetic." But beneath her laughter, Adrian's mind raced. A child wasn't just flesh and blood, it was legacy. His empire, his wealth, his future, all needed an heir. If Elena was carrying his child, then he would rip it from her arms and raise it himself, molding it into the successor he wanted. Elena's role would end the moment the court stamped its seal. He picked up his phone and dialed. "Lowell," he barked to his private investigator. "Find me proof. Medical records, witnesses, anything that confirms she's pregnant. And dig into Knight. If I can tie them together, I'll have everything I need." Lowell hesitated. "Sir, Knight isn't someone you want as an enemy. He's dangerous." Adrian's smile turned cold. "So am I." That night, Elena received an envelope slipped under her apartment door. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a mock custody petition, with her name printed in bold. Scrawled across it in Adrian's handwriting were the words, "Try me." Elena's knees buckled. She clutched the paper, her chest tightening until she could barely breathe. Her worst fear was becoming reality. Adrian was coming for her baby. When she told Maria over the phone, her sister's voice shook with rage. He's bluffing. He doesn't have proof yet. But Elena, you need to prepare. If this goes to court, you'll need every ounce of strength you have. Elena pressed a hand to her belly, whispering, I won't let him take you. But her resolve was thin, cracked by terror. She had no money for lawyers, no power to fight Adrian's endless resources. And yet, in the darkest corner of her mind, a flicker of hope remained. Gabriel Knight. The man who had shielded her. The man whose name alone could shake Adrian's confidence. But leaning on him meant trusting again, risking everything. Elena's tears fell silently as she stared at Adrian's threat. And somewhere across the city, Adrian raised his glass in triumph, convinced he had already won, never realizing that the game he was playing would one day be the very thing that destroyed him. The next morning, Elena sat at her kitchen table, the mock custody petition still lying in front of her like a loaded gun. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten. Her hands shook as she stared at the bold black letters of Adrian's threat. Her phone buzzed. I'm outside, Maria's voice came through. Minutes later, Elena's older sister stormed into the apartment. Maria Rossi was everything Elena wasn't, sharp, fiery, and unafraid of confrontation. As a lawyer, she had built a reputation for fighting impossible cases. She scooped up the petition, eyes narrowing as she read it. This isn't just intimidation, Maria muttered. He's preparing to file. And if he does, Elena, you're in for a war. Tears welled in Elena's eyes. I can't fight him, Maria. He has money, power, connections. What do I have? Maria crouched, taking her sister's trembling hands. You have me, and you have the truth. Courts don't like men who flaunt mistresses while threatening pregnant ex-wives. He may think he's untouchable, but I've seen bigger men fall. Elena wanted to believe her. She wanted to draw strength from Maria's fire, but deep down fear gnawed at her. He'll find a way. He always does. Maria's jaw tightened. Then we'll find a way too. First, we document everything. His threats, his public humiliation at your school, his affair. Then we prepare for the custody hearing. I won't let him take your child, Elena. Not while I'm breathing. Relief mingled with dread. For the first time, Elena felt a spark of hope, but it was fragile, flickering in the storm. That afternoon, as Maria made calls from her office, a sleek black car pulled up outside. Gabriel Knight stepped out, his presence commanding even in the quiet street. He knocked gently before Elena opened the door, startled. You shouldn't be here, she whispered, glancing nervously up and down the hall. I know, Gabriel said, his voice calm. But you need to know something. Adrian is moving fast. He's trying to dig up medical records. He wants proof of your pregnancy. Elena's blood ran cold. How do you know? Gabriel's eyes hardened. Because I have people watching him. Just like he has people watching you. Maria appeared from the kitchen, arms crossed, eyes sharp. And why exactly are you involved, Mr. Knight? What's in this for you? Gabriel met her gaze evenly. Protecting Elena isn't a transaction. Adrian Moore is dangerous. I won't stand by while he destroys her. Maria studied him for a long moment, then exhaled. Fine, but understand this. If you're using her, I'll come after you myself. A flicker of respect passed between them. Gabriel nodded. Fair enough. As the day faded into night, Elena sat on the couch, her sister strategizing legal moves on one side, Gabriel quietly making phone calls on the other. For the first time in months, she wasn't alone. And yet, that terrified her even more. Because every time she let someone close, it ended in betrayal. She pressed a hand to her belly, whispering a silent vow. I'll fight for you, no matter the cost. And though Adrian believed he was tightening his grip, what he couldn't see was that Elena now had allies, ones powerful enough to turn his own game against him. The gala at the Astoria Hotel was the kind of event Elena once avoided at all costs. Glittering chandeliers, velvet carpets, cameras flashing at every corner. It was Adrian's world, not hers. But tonight, Maria insisted she attend. If Adrian wants to paint you as weak, Maria said firmly, then you show the world the opposite. You show them you're not alone. Still, Elena hesitated in front of the mirror, adjusting the simple navy gown Maria had chosen. It skimmed her frame carefully, concealing the curve of her belly. Her heart hammered with dread. What if Adrian sees me? What if he notices? Her thoughts shattered when Gabriel arrived. He stood in her doorway, dressed in a tailored black suit that seemed to command the air around him. His gaze swept over her, not in judgment but in something gentler, approval. "You look strong," he said quietly. She shook her head. "I feel terrified." "Then let me be terrified for you," Gabriel replied. "You just walk beside me." And so, arm in arm, they entered the ballroom. The effect was instant. Heads turned, whispers cascaded like falling dominoes. The press cameras flashed wildly. Gabriel Knight, the elusive billionaire, arriving with Mystery Woman again. This time, Elena didn't flinch. With Gabriel's hand steady at the small of her back, she forced her chin high. Across the room, Adrian froze mid-conversation, a glass of champagne in hand. Cassandra followed his gaze, her smile faltering as she saw Elena radiant at Gabriel's side. Rage darkened Adrian's face. He stormed toward them, but by then half the room was already watching. "Well, well," Adrian sneered, his voice sharp enough to slice through the hum of chatter. "Elena, you do know how to make a spectacle." Gabriel stepped slightly forward, shielding her. His voice was calm but carried like thunder. "The only spectacle here is a man who abandoned his wife and now stalks her like a dog." Gasps rippled across the crowd. Cameras snapped. Cassandra's cheeks flushed crimson. Elena's breath caught. Gabriel was turning Adrian's game against him in front of everyone. Adrian's jaw tightened. "Careful, Knight. You don't know the whole story." "I know enough," Gabriel said coldly, "and so will everyone else soon." The tension was unbearable. Elena wanted to shrink, to disappear, but at the same time, she felt a surge of something she hadn't in months: pride. For once, she wasn't the one cowering under Adrian's shadow. Maria appeared at her side, slipping a discreet hand into Elena's. "Let them watch," Maria whispered. "Every word he says digs his own grave." Adrian realized it too late. He forced a smile for the crowd, but his eyes blazed with fury. Cassandra tugged at his arm, hissing, "Stop it, you're embarrassing yourself." But Adrian couldn't stop. "Don't think for a second this changes anything," he spat at Elena. "You can dress up, you can cling to powerful men, but in the end, you're still mine. And so is what you're hiding." Elena's blood froze. Did he know? Was he hinting at her pregnancy? Gabriel stepped in, voice like steel. "She doesn't belong to you. Not now, not ever." The crowd erupted in whispers, the scandal igniting like wildfire. Adrian, realizing his mistake, stormed out with Cassandra trailing behind. Elena stood trembling, but when Gabriel squeezed her hand, she felt anchored. And though the night ended in whispers and flashing cameras, one truth was undeniable. Adrian Moore was losing control, and the world had just witnessed it. Adrian Moore never tolerated humiliation. The scene at the Astoria had played on every society page, every gossip blog, and even business journals that normally celebrated his deals. Instead of headlines praising his latest project, the press was buzzing about his ex-wife and the billionaire she was suddenly connected to. Adrian smashed the newspaper against his desk. Cassandra sat on the couch nearby, sipping champagne with forced poise. "You're letting her win," she said sweetly, though her tone carried a sharp edge. "She hasn't won anything," Adrian growled. "Elena is weak. She doesn't belong in my world. And if she thinks parading around with Knight makes her untouchable, she's about to learn how wrong she is." He picked up his phone and dialed Lowell, his private investigator. "Time to ruin her," Adrian ordered. "I want dirt, real dirt. If you can't find any, create it. I want her name smeared across headlines by the end of the week." Lowell hesitated. "Sir, fabricating stories carries risk." Adrian cut him off. "I don't care about risks. She's pregnant. I know it. If I can brand her unfit now, the courts will eat it up. Make her look unstable, reckless. A woman like that doesn't deserve custody." Within days, the first whispers began. A blog posted grainy photos of Elena leaving Gabriel's car, the headline sneering, "Teacher or temptress? Mystery woman living double life with billionaire." Another outlet suggested she was spending Gabriel's money recklessly, painting her as a gold digger. None of it was true, but truth didn't matter. Perception did. At school, colleagues avoided her. Parents complained to the principal. One mother cornered Elena after class, sneering, "Is this really the example you want to set for our children? Throwing yourself at rich men?" The humiliation was suffocating. Elena tried to protest, but her words were drowned out by whispers and judgmental stares. When she told Maria, her sister's fury nearly shook the apartment walls. "He's manufacturing scandal," Maria said, pacing. "He wants to build a case before custody proceedings start. If the court believes you're reckless, he'll have leverage." But how do I fight lies? Elena whispered, her voice cracking. Maria's eyes softened. We expose them as lies, and we remind the court who Adrian really is. But even Maria's fire couldn't shield Elena from the daily torment. Everywhere she turned, her reputation was crumbling. She found graffiti scrawled on her classroom door. Gold digger. Her students asked innocent questions she couldn't bear to answer. At night, she sat awake, clutching her belly, whispering through tears, I won't let him take you, I won't. One evening, as she left the school, she found Gabriel waiting by his car. His face was tight with anger as he handed her a tablet. He's feeding the press. These are targeted attacks, Elena. He wants to bury you. Her hands shook as she scrolled through the vicious articles. He'll win, she whispered. He always wins. Gabriel's gaze hardened. Not this time. He's fighting me now, not just you. And I don't lose. Elena wanted to believe him, but fear gripped her tighter than hope. And while she battled humiliation in the public eye, Adrian sat in his penthouse, pouring another drink, convinced that every headline was tightening the noose around Elena's neck. What he didn't see was that his own rope was already fraying. The courthouse smelled of old wood and tension. Elena sat at the plaintiff's table, her palms clammy against the stack of papers Maria had prepared. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear the bailiff call the case. Moore v. Moore. Adrian entered like a king striding into his court. His suit was flawless, Cassandra trailing behind in a cream-colored dress, her face the picture of smug superiority. The reporters lining the back rows scribbled eagerly. This wasn't just a custody battle, it was a spectacle. Maria squeezed Elena's hand. Stay calm, don't let him see fear. But Elena couldn't stop trembling. Her belly pressed tight against her blouse, hidden as best as she could, but there was no hiding it anymore. The secret was out. Adrian's lawyer rose first, his voice sharp as a blade. Your Honor, my client seeks custody of his unborn child. Mrs. Moore is clearly unfit to be a parent. Her reckless behavior with Mr. Gabriel Knight has already been plastered across tabloids. She has no financial stability, no proper home environment, and her reputation is in ruins. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Elena's throat constricted. Maria shot to her feet. Objection. These are unsubstantiated rumors spread by Mr. Moore himself. He abandoned his wife during pregnancy, flaunted an affair, and now wants to use wealth and lies to steal her child. The judge raised a hand, silencing the room. We'll hear both sides. When it was Elena's turn to speak, she rose slowly, her legs weak. Your Honor, she began, her voice trembling. I may not have wealth, but I have love. I have a home where my baby will be cherished. Adrian doesn't want this child for love. He wants it for control. Adrian leaned back, smirking, as if her words were nothing but air. His lawyer pounced again. Mrs. Moore, how do you explain photographs of you leaving Mr. Knight's residence? How do you justify exposing your unborn child to scandal? The courtroom spun. Elena's breath grew shallow, her knees buckled. Gasps filled the air as she collapsed against the table, clutching her stomach. Panic erupted. Order! Order! The judge barked, but the gavel's pounding was drowned by whispers. Adrian's smirk faltered for the first time. Cassandra grabbed his arm, whispering frantically. Then, like a storm cutting through the noise, Gabriel Knight strode into the courtroom. Heads turned, reporters scrambled to capture the moment. He didn't glance at Adrian, didn't acknowledge the judge right away. Instead, he went straight to Elena, kneeling beside her, his hand steady on her shoulder. Breathe, he murmured. You're not alone. Her wide eyes met his, tears streaking her cheeks. For the first time, she saw no pity in his gaze, only unwavering strength. Rising to his full height, Gabriel faced the judge. His voice carried like thunder. Your Honor, I request to speak as a witness. The attacks on Mrs. Moore's character are fabrications. I have evidence that Mr. Kermismet, Adrian Moore himself, orchestrated the very scandals he's presenting today. The courtroom erupted. Adrian shot to his feet. Lies, he's lying. But Gabriel's calm expression never wavered. He handed a sealed folder to the bailiff. Inside are communications between Mr. Moore and hired investigators instructing them to plant false stories. Bank records, emails, timestamps. It's all there. The judge's eyes narrowed as he flipped through the folder. Silence fell heavy. Elena, still trembling, looked up at Gabriel in disbelief. He had walked into the lion's den and shifted the balance in her favor. And as Adrian realized the ground beneath him was cracking, fury flashed in his eyes. For the first time, the king of control felt the terrifying sting of losing it. The courtroom was still buzzing from Gabriel's intervention when Maria rose to her feet, her eyes blazing with the fire of a woman who had been waiting for this moment. She adjusted her blazer, stepped forward, and addressed the judge with a calm, steady voice. "Your Honor, the petition before you is not only a custody grab, it is a cover-up. Adrian Moore isn't here because he cares about this unborn child. He is here because he needs leverage, and we can prove it." The judge arched a brow. "Proceed." Maria nodded to Gabriel, who produced another folder. This one was thicker, heavier. The bailiff carried it to the bench. Inside were documents Gabriel's team had uncovered: bank transfers, falsified invoices, shell companies. "These records," Maria explained, "show that Mr. Moore has been embezzling millions from his own investors. Money laundering, tax fraud, offshore accounts. His empire is built on lies. And now, fearing exposure, he seeks to secure custody of this child as a shield, a distraction, and a bargaining chip." Gasps erupted around the room. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cassandra paled, her manicured hands clutching Adrian's arm. Adrian leapt to his feet, his voice booming. "This is outrageous. These so-called documents are fabrications. Knight has always been jealous of my rise. This is his way of tearing me down." But Gabriel's voice was cold steel. "I don't need to fabricate what's already true. Federal investigators have copies of these same documents. This courtroom isn't the only place your secrets are about to unravel." The judge's eyes darkened as he flipped through the evidence. "Mr. Moore, these are serious allegations. You will address them, but not here. For now, I am inclined to agree with Mrs. Moore's counsel. This case is not about custody, it is about control." Adrian's composure cracked. Sweat beaded his forehead. He leaned toward Cassandra, whispering furiously, but she pulled her arm away. The room was watching, cameras catching every falter, every twitch of fear. Maria pressed the advantage. "Your Honor, Adrian Moore is attempting to weaponize the legal system to cover his crimes. He abandoned my sister during her pregnancy. He orchestrated false scandals to destroy her reputation, and now he seeks to steal her child. This is not a father fighting for custody. It is a criminal fighting for survival." Elena sat frozen, her breath shallow. She could hardly believe the words being spoken. For months she had felt powerless, trapped beneath Adrian's shadow. Now, for the first time, the truth was piercing that darkness. The judge banged the gavel. "We will recess until further notice. This court will not be used as a stage for manipulation. Mr. Moore, expect to hear from federal authorities." The room erupted into chaos. Reporters swarmed, shouting questions. Adrian shoved past them, his face twisted with rage. Cassandra trailed behind, but her perfect mask had shattered. Elena turned to Maria, her voice trembling. How did you find all this?" Maria gave a faint smile. "I didn't. Gabriel did. My job was just to present it." Elena looked at Gabriel, who stood calm and unshaken amidst the storm. His eyes met hers, steady, unwavering. "I told you," he said softly. "He doesn't scare me." Her throat tightened, tears stinging her eyes. For the first time, she believed him. And as Adrian stormed out of the courthouse, hunted by reporters and shadowed by the weight of his own crimes, one truth became clear. The empire he built on lies was crumbling, and Elena was no longer powerless against him. Adrian Moore had always prided himself on control. Deals, people, appearances, everything bent to his will. But after the courtroom disaster, control slipped through his fingers like sand. That night, his penthouse was a battlefield. Empty bottles littered the glass table, Cassandra pacing in her silk robe. "Adrian, you need to calm down," she said, her voice tight. "Calm down?" he roared, slamming his fist against the wall. "Knight humiliated me in front of the press. Maria exposed my accounts. The judge practically invited the feds into my business. Do you understand what this means?" Cassandra's eyes darted nervously. "It means we need to lay low. Maybe we cut our losses. Let Elena have her baby. Focus on rebuilding." Adrian spun on her, his face twisted with fury. "That child is mine, my blood, my heir. You think I'll let her raise it alone? You think I'll let Knight play father while I'm painted as a monster?" His voice dropped to a hiss. "Over my dead body." For the first time, Cassandra looked afraid. She tried to speak, but Adrian stormed past her, grabbing his coat. Across town, Elena sat with Maria, the flicker of hope still fragile in her chest. But as night deepened, unease gnawed at her. She pulled Gabriel's jacket tighter around her shoulders. "He won't give up," she whispered. "I know him. Adrian doesn't lose gracefully." Maria reached for her hand. "We'll keep fighting. We have the law on our side now." Elena forced a nod, but her instincts screamed louder. Adrian was cornered, and cornered men were dangerous. Hours later, her fear proved true. As Elena stepped out of her apartment to throw away trash, a shadow lunged from the alley. A hand clamped over her mouth, dragging her back into the darkness. Panic surged. She kicked, thrashed, her cry muffled. The stench of Adrian's cologne hit her like a nightmare. "Thought you could outsmart me?" Adrian's voice snarled in her ear. "Thought you could parade around with Night, ruin my name, and take my child? You belong to me, Elena. You always will." Tears blurred her vision. "Please, Adrian, don't." But his grip tightened. "You'll sign over custody, quietly, or I'll make sure you regret ever crossing me." Suddenly, headlights flooded the alley. A black car screeched to a halt, doors slamming open. Gabriel's tall frame emerged, fury burning in his eyes. "Let her go." Gabriel's voice boomed. Adrian laughed bitterly. "Ah, the knight in shining armor. Fitting name. Do you really think you can take what's mine?" Gabriel took a step forward, fists clenched. "She's not yours. Not anymore. Not ever." The tension crackled like a live wire. Adrian's grip faltered for just a moment, enough for Elena to wrench free and stumble into Gabriel's arms. Adrian lunged, but Gabriel caught his wrist mid-swing, twisting it until Adrian roared in pain. "You've destroyed enough lives," Gabriel growled. "This ends tonight." Police sirens wailed in the distance. Maria's doing. She had called them the moment Elena went outside. Adrian's face twisted with rage as the flashing lights closed in. "You think you've won?" "This isn't over," he spat, thrashing against Gabriel's grip until officers dragged him away in handcuffs. Elena collapsed against Gabriel, trembling, his arms wrapped around her like a shield. "You're safe," he murmured, though his jaw was tight with fury. But as Adrian was shoved into the squad car, his eyes locked on Elena's. And in that chilling glare, she saw a promise. He would rather burn everything down than let her go. The courtroom clash and violent alley confrontation had set the stage for Adrian Moore's inevitable collapse. The morning after his arrest, headlines screamed his disgrace. Real estate mogul detained in connection to fraud investigation. Stockholders panicked, investors withdrew, and his empire, once untouchable, crumbled in real time. Adrian sat in a holding cell, his expensive suit wrinkled, his jaw bruised from Gabriel's grip. He paced like a caged animal, replaying the humiliation over and over. For years he had controlled the narrative, always 2 steps ahead. Now the world was feasting on his downfall. When Cassandra finally visited, she didn't bring comfort. She arrived in a tailored beige coat, sunglasses shielding her eyes, her lips painted in perfect indifference. Adrian smirked, expecting loyalty. "Took you long enough," he drawled. "Get me out of here." But Cassandra didn't move closer. She sat across the glass barrier, her smile sharp. "Adrian, darling, I'm not here to help you. I'm here to save myself." His smirk faltered. "What are you talking about?" She slid a folder across to the guard, who placed it on Adrian's side. Inside were legal papers, divorce, asset claims. Cassandra's voice was calm, almost sweet. "The feds came to me this morning. I gave them everything they wanted, records, accounts, your little offshore games. In exchange, they let me walk." Adrian's face turned crimson. You betrayed me?" "No," Cassandra said coolly. "You betrayed yourself. I just decided I didn't want to go down with the ship." He slammed his fists against the glass, rattling it violently. Cassandra didn't flinch. "Do you know what it's like?" she whispered, leaning closer. "To be with a man who obsesses over power, who uses people like tools? I thought I could handle it. I thought being Mrs. Moore meant security. But all it meant was misery." She smiled, cruel and satisfied. "Enjoy prison, Adrian. Maybe you'll finally learn you can't own everything." With that, she rose and left, heels clicking like a victory march. Adrian collapsed back into his chair, the reality sinking like acid. His empire was gone. His mistress had abandoned him. The child he thought would be his legacy was slipping beyond his reach. For the first time, Adrian Moore felt powerless. Meanwhile, across town, Elena sat in Gabriel's office, Maria by her side. News of Adrian's collapse filled the screen. Gabriel switched it off, his voice calm. "He'll fight from the shadows, but his days of power are over. The law will bury him now." Elena pressed a hand to her belly, her voice trembling. So it's really over? Maria squeezed her shoulder. He'll face charges for fraud, for assault, for everything. He won't be able to touch you or the baby. Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks, not of fear, but of release. Months of suffocating dread lifted like smoke. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe she and her child might have a future free of Adrian's shadow. Gabriel watched her silently, his expression unreadable. But when Elena met his eyes, she saw something she hadn't expected. Gentleness, and a quiet vow he hadn't yet spoken aloud. And as Adrian's empire burned and Cassandra walked away victorious in her betrayal, Elena realized the tide had turned. The monster who once ruled her life had finally fallen, and she was no longer his prisoner. The hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender. The storm outside raged against the windows, but inside, all of Elena's world had narrowed to the rhythmic beeping of machines and the sharp waves of pain tearing through her body. She clutched the bed rails, gasping as another contraction hit, sweat beading her forehead. Maria stood near the doctor, murmuring encouragement, but Elena's eyes searched frantically for one face. Then the door swung open, and there he was, Gabriel. He rushed to her side, his suit jacket gone, sleeves rolled up, eyes fierce with concern. "I'm here," he said, taking her hand firmly. "I'm not going anywhere." Tears slid down Elena's cheeks. "I can't, Gabriel, I'm too tired." "Yes, you can," he whispered, leaning closer. "You've fought through worse. You've carried this child through storms, through fear, through Adrian's shadow. This is the final step. You are stronger than you know." His words anchored her as another wave of pain crashed. She cried out, but this time she gripped his hand and held on like it was the only thing tethering her to the world. Hours passed in a blur of agony and whispers of comfort. And then, at last, a cry pierced the air. A fragile, beautiful sound that shattered the darkness around her. The nurse placed a tiny, wriggling bundle into Elena's arms. Her baby. Her child. She stared down at the red face, the delicate fingers curling instinctively. Tears poured freely as she whispered, "Hello, my love, I've been waiting for you." Maria wiped her eyes quietly, while Gabriel stood frozen, awe softening every line of his usually impenetrable expression. He leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's perfect." Elena looked up at him, exhaustion written across her face but a radiant glow breaking through. "She?" Gabriel nodded. "A daughter." Elena laughed through her tears, pressing her lips against the baby's head. "My daughter." For the first time in months, no years, she felt safe. Adrian's shadow had been banished, his power dismantled. The child in her arms wasn't a pawn, wasn't a prize. It was her heart made flesh. Gabriel touched the baby's tiny hand, his own trembling slightly. "She'll never be alone, Elena. Neither will you. I swear it." Elena's throat tightened. She had been so afraid to trust again, so afraid to let anyone close. But as she looked at Gabriel, the man who had shielded her when she was most vulnerable, who had stood in court and faced down her demons, she realized trust had already grown between them, quietly, fiercely, like a seed pushing through stone. The storm outside began to fade, the first rays of dawn breaking through. Elena held her daughter closer, rocking gently as tears slipped down her cheeks. Not of fear, but of release, of healing. Maria placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did it. You're free now." Elena nodded, whispering to her daughter, "You'll never know the pain I carried. Only love, only safety." And as Gabriel stood beside her, a silent vow burning in his eyes, Elena knew she had finally stepped out of the darkness. Her past was broken, but her future was whole, because in her arms lay hope, and at her side stood a man who would never let her fall again. Spring sunlight spilled through the tall windows of Gabriel Knight's estate, casting golden warmth across the garden. Elena sat on a stone bench, cradling her daughter in her arms. The baby's soft coos blended with the chirping of birds, a symphony of peace she once thought she'd never hear. For the first time in months, Elena could breathe. No court summons, no paparazzi, no whispers in the hallway at school. Adrian's empire had collapsed under the weight of his own corruption. Federal prosecutors had charged him with fraud, money laundering, and attempted assault. Cassandra's betrayal had sealed his fate. He was no longer the man who haunted her nights. He was just another criminal awaiting trial. Still, Elena's heart carried scars. Freedom didn't erase the years of fear. She pressed her lips against her daughter's forehead, whispering, You'll never know his darkness. I promise you that. Footsteps crunched softly against the gravel path. Gabriel approached, dressed simply in a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms. Not the billionaire untouchable by society, but the man who had held her in the rain, who had stood beside her in the courtroom. He stopped a few feet away, his gaze tender as it fell on Elena and the baby. You both look perfect here. Elena smiled faintly. Perfect is a word I never thought I'd have again. Gabriel sat beside her, silent for a moment. Then he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Her breath caught as he opened it, revealing a delicate ring that shimmered in the light. Elena Moore, he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. You've fought harder battles than anyone I know. You've survived betrayal, humiliation, and threats that would break most people. And through it all, you never stopped protecting the one thing that mattered most, your child. I don't want to replace what you've lost. I just want to stand beside you, to make sure you never fight alone again. Will you let me? Tears welled in Elena's eyes. She looked at her daughter, then at Gabriel, her heart aching with something she hadn't dared feel in years: hope. Gabriel, I've been so afraid to trust again. Then don't trust blindly, he said softly. Trust slowly. Trust because I'll earn it, every single day. Her hands shook as she placed the baby gently in Gabriel's arms. He held her daughter with a care so natural it made Elena's chest tighten. Watching him cradle the child, their child, in every way that mattered, she knew her answer. Yes, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Yes, Gabriel, I will. Relief and joy spread across his face as he slid the ring onto her finger. He kissed her forehead, then the baby's tiny hand, sealing a promise not with words, but with love. That evening, as the sun set over the city, news of Adrian's guilty plea broke across every channel. The empire he had built was gone, his legacy reduced to ashes. For Elena, it was poetic justice. The man who once told her she would never survive without him was now caged, powerless, forgotten. She stood on the balcony with Gabriel beside her and her daughter in her arms. The air was cool, fragrant with spring blossoms. For the first time, her world was filled not with fear, but with promise. And as she whispered to her child, "We're safe now. We're free," Elena knew this was more than survival. It was a new beginning, the kind where love, justice, and hope finally triumphed over darkness. So, that's how our story comes to a close. My dear friends, you're still here with me, aren't you? If you've stayed until now, it must mean something in this journey touched your heart in a way words alone cannot explain. Elena's story is not just about betrayal and revenge. It's about resilience, hope, and learning that even in the darkest storms, there is a light waiting to guide us through. The Stoics once said, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. How often do we, like Elena, carry fears that chain us down, believing we cannot rise again? And yet, as Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Every obstacle, every heartbreak, is not the end. It's the path that shapes us into who we are meant to become. Maybe tonight, you're carrying your own battles. Maybe you've been betrayed, or maybe you're afraid to trust again. But let this story remind you, healing is possible. And love, whether from another person or from within, is always worth fighting for. If this touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. Stay with us because more stories are waiting to find you.